This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, cracking codes of the coming of the Messiah. With us this evening, Rabbi Isser Weisberg, a leading scholar of Jewish end-time prophecies. Rabbi Weisberg, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you for having me back.
Great to have you back. I wanted to follow up on our fascinating discussion last week. Now, Rabbi Weisberg, last week we were focusing on your study of the Torah, the prophecies in the Torah, and how you believe in that context Trump will prevail. You are confident that he will get a second term, and we're going to weave all of that into our discussion today. Now, before we continue the discussion, are you still quite confident about Trump getting a second term?
Yes, I am.
And there does seem to be a little bit of hope in that sense with the Texas lawsuit, etc., right?
I guess so. I'm not really concerned about what's happening down here. Like I told you last time, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out. You know, God has ways of surprising us. Sometimes it's hard to anticipate how it's going to happen. So I'm not really focusing a lot on what's going on in the courts and, you know, what's going on in general with Trump's team and the states and the Supreme Court and all that stuff, because I don't really know how it's going to happen. A lot of times things very unexpected happen.
Absolutely. So Rabbi Weisberg, let me ask you this. What is your perspective and how would you tie it into the Torah and its prophecies? How do you see this whole pandemic, what I would call the plandemic, the lockdowns, the mask, the global reset, the vaccines that are coming? It's some kind of Luciferian takeover, in my view. What do you make of it in general?
I agree with you. I just want to point out that from a Jewish point of view, we don't give any independent existence to Lucifer, Satan, forces of darkness. They don't exist in Judaism. There's only God, and darkness just means when God hides his face and when he allows people to be confused for the specific reason because he wants people to make choices. If everything is crystal clear, if there's only light and there's no darkness, there's no free choice and life has very little meaning. There's no accomplishments, there's no success. And there's no real relationship with God if everything is predetermined and everything is so easy. So God makes things difficult. I mean, that's why he sent a serpent in the Garden of Eden from day one to confuse Eve. The serpent was not an independent being. I don't know how other religions, I'm not an expert in other religions, but as far in Judaism is the Satan, the serpent, they're all messengers of God. They're basically angels and they're sent for a specific reason. The Jewish texts give a metaphor. For example, a king who wanted to test to see if his son was worthy of becoming king, and he wanted to test the moral character of his son. So he asked a woman to pose as a prostitute and to try to seduce the son. And she was praying the whole time that she does not succeed. I mean, she gave it her all. The king said, I want you to try your best to seduce him. I want to see if he has the moral character to stand up to these kinds of tests, if he could be the king of this empire. And she's not a bad person. She's not really a prostitute even. She just is doing what the king wants, and she wants to fail. So it's important to stress that we don't believe that there's any forces of darkness. And because of that, we're never afraid of darkness because we realize it's only God hiding his face. There is no reality to Satan, to darkness, to confusion. It's all part of the plan. So right before the Messiah comes, there's one last test to mankind and to see that if we're worthy for the redemption. And it's very, very confusing now because the left puts on a really good show. They present themselves as being very moral, very good people. They care about everybody. They care about minorities. They care about blacks. They care about women. They care about gays. It's all a facade. You know, basically they just want to undermine the basic fabric of our society, the foundations of our country, the foundations of morality, the strength of the family, of the nuclear family. They make fun of religion. They make fun of God. They try to ban God from our schools, from our public places, and all this is in the guise of caring about everybody and not allowing religion to brainwash people. So this is a test to see if we have the moral fortitude to stand up to this confusion and to see the clarity in all this darkness. So there are no forces of evil, but it is a test. And, thank God, a great percentage of mankind, Jews and Christians and many other people, see through all this, and they're not allowing themselves to be sucked into the fictitious and hypocritical arguments of the left. But that's basically what it is. So yes, I agree with you. This whole thing, the pandemic and all this was kind of part of this whole confusion.
Okay, so definitely there are some differences with the Christian understanding. I'm a Christian, and we believe that there's an active devil, there's an active force of evil, Lucifer, Satan. So just wait, let me ask then, in terms of the Holocaust and Hitler, that obviously is a very evil thing, and Hitler was very evil, and there's a force of evil behind that, right?
It's one of the biggest, the most difficult things to understand in Judaism. And it's, according to our tradition, Moses asked God, why do you allow evil in this world? Why do you allow people to suffer? And God said, I really can't give you the answer now. Even Moses was denied that answer. So we don't really understand how God could let it happen, but we do firmly believe that there are no other forces involved. The Torah actually, how terribly painful the Holocaust is, and how many it raises enormous amount of questions for which we don't have an answer, and really we should have serious complaints to God how He allowed it to happen, because no matter how bad the Jews were, they obviously didn't deserve that. So nobody's perfect and nobody's 100% righteous, but the punishments, it's not just the Holocaust, the suffering that the Jews went through for the past 2,000 years, a lot of it was at the hands of Christians, Muslims, other people. We have no explanation for it. We don't blame Satan. We don't blame God. We ask God to try to explain it to us. He says, no, not right now. There'll be a time when you'll understand it. But we don't believe that it's other forces. In fact, from the very fact that the Torah in the Bible, I'm sure you're familiar with it, the Bible talks about the incredible suffering that the Jews are going to endure many times, that the Jews are going to suffer, and they're going to endure a lot of throughout the generations. It says the Jews will be hated. They'll be thrown out of one country after the other. People will make fun of them. People will persecute them. It's all in the Bible, very, very explicitly. So it's not like it came out of nowhere. It's not like we didn't know in the beginning when we accepted the Torah that this might happen. We accepted it anyway. We don't ask. We ask. We're allowed to ask questions, but the questions don't in any way stop us from continuing on in our mission and believing that there is some explanation that maybe one day we will understand. But we do not attribute it to forces of darkness.
Okay, so just let me ask, it's important to try to be good and to follow the Ten Commandments, other of the rules. Do you believe in individuals having souls and that there's an afterlife?
Of course, yeah, that's a basic tenet of Judaism. That the soul lives on forever. The soul is not a physical thing. It can't die. It's a godly thing, and it lives forever. The body is just something temporary.
And will there be reward for good and punishment for evil? Is there a heaven and a hell?
Well, there is punishment and reward, but it's not in the sense, we don't really believe that there's a place like hell where there's like fires and like all the pictures of hell with the devil and with the pitchfork and the fires. We don't really believe there's a place like that. We believe it's all metaphors. Hell is basically the realization after the soul leaves the body and it realizes what it could have accomplished and what the person did not accomplish, and the things that the person did that he shouldn't have done, that embarrassment is very, very painful, just the realization. And that's really the metaphor of hell. It's not really a place, and it's not really the physical suffering, but it's emotional embarrassment of what we could have been, and how we wasted, precious days of our lives, and not only wasted, but sometimes did things that we're embarrassed about. But it's not eternal. I mean, it's that it also is a cleansing process, because when a person is ashamed of what he did, that itself cleanses them, and that itself makes them aware that they shouldn't be doing that again. So it's not that God wants us to suffer this embarrassment just for the sake of suffering and pain, but he wants us to cleanse ourselves and to give us another chance. So hell is basically the realization that we made a mistake, and which empowers us to make the right decisions, that we won't do it again. And we all have another chance. We believe in the resurrection of the dead, so we will have another chance, to correct all our misdeeds and lead a better life, a more moral life.
So there's a little bit of some similarity perhaps to the Catholic understanding and doctrine of purgatory. There's a certain period of cleansing for people perhaps that weren't that good and that don't get to heaven right away.
Right.
Okay. So I just think this is, I think, an extremely, of course, important discussion, but I also mean for our discussion today with the coming of the Messiah and the Jewish understanding of it, in terms of all of your study of it. So, and you've cracked a lot of codes and done a lot of studying of this, and I've been watching your videos, and it's really very fascinating. So I want to get to that. As we approach that, let's just back up for a minute. Could you explain a little bit, Rabbi Weisberg, explain to us a little bit of how the Jewish people are in exile?
Well, basically, it's prophesied in the Torah in many places that the land of Israel is a very holy place and a special place where Jews could enjoy a very, very close relationship with God. And that's basically, the temple is basically a physical home where God allows himself to be present and to be felt. Because even though God is infinite, he also has the power to make himself present in a finite world. I mean, that's a little similar to the Christian doctrine that God could become a human if he wants to, because he's infinite and he's unlimited. So he has the power even to limit himself and to be in that the Christians believe in a human body, but we don't believe that, but we believe that God could be present in this physical world in some way. And the presence is manifest in the Holy Temple. There was a special ark that was actually built by Moses, and we believe that it's hidden somewhere. And when the Messiah comes, we'll find it. I think there's a movie about that, actually. But we believe that the ark will be found. And the original tablets that God gave Moses are in the ark. And that's housed in the Holy Temple. And in those tablets that were given to Moses, and in the Holy of Holies, the presence of God is actually the most manifest in this world. And the temple is a place where Jews could come and pray and sing and offer sacrifices and connect to God in a very intimate way. And it has a very special holiness, the temple of Jerusalem and the entire land of Israel. And it's a special gift from God. And he gave it to us, like he says in the Torah, in the Bible explicitly, on the condition that we appreciate this gift and not that we abuse it. So if the Jews don't behave properly in the land of Israel, then God says you're going to be thrown out. But it's explicit in the Bible that everything is only temporary, that a covenant with the Jewish people is everlasting and it will never be broken. But if the Jews don't behave properly, they're going to have to go through a period of cleansing. They're going to have to be exiled from the Holy Land. So it happened once after the destruction of the first temple, and then we were exiled to Babylon for 70 years, and then we came back and built the second temple, and that lasted for 420 years until it was destroyed by the Romans. And then the Romans not only destroyed the temple, but they kicked the Jews out of Israel. And Jews weren't allowed to step foot in Israel for centuries. And then finally, we were allowed to come back just in very small numbers, but not really to establish any real presence or any government. But first, under the Ottomans, they let Jews come back in small numbers as long as they were subservient to the Ottomans and didn't assert themselves in any way and didn't were loyal to the Ottoman government. But it was a very small presence of Jews. But Jews always tried and always prayed, and there were always some Jews in Israel. But until the establishment of the state of Israel, where millions of Jews from all over the world came back to live in Israel, as God promised in the Bible, that eventually at the end of days, the exile will end and Jews will return to the land of Israel. So in a sense, physically, we're able to live in the land of Israel, but spiritually we're still in exile because we don't have a temple. The presence of God is not felt because there is no temple. Even the Temple Mount is not, even though technically the state of Israel is in control of the Temple Mount, but they basically gave up control to the Arabs, and Jews are not allowed even to go there and pray there. So we basically don't even have access to the place. Jews, the closest we could go is to the wall, the kotel we call it, but that's the outer retaining wall of the Temple Mount. It's not actually on top of the Temple Mount. And so even though we have the land of Israel, until God returns to us in the temple, we're still spiritually in exile, even though physically we do have, every Jew, if he wants, can move to Israel. So we're not really exiled physically from the land, but the spiritual redemption has not occurred until the Messiah comes and rebuilds the temple.
Okay, but 1948, therefore, very significant landmark watershed, this is very meaningful in terms of prophecies and the end times, right?
Correct. It's a prelude to the redemption, because when the Messiah comes, there has to be already an infrastructure. Messiah is not going to start from scratch building a country which is desolate. Before the Jews came back in 1948, even though the Arabs were there, the Turks were there, the Romans were there, they never really made it into a viable country. There was never really any produce to think of. It was mostly desert. It was mostly wasteland. There was a few, there were people, small numbers of people living in villages. It never really was a thriving place until the Jews came back in 1948 and started rebuilding it and created an infrastructure where now we have a country and a thriving country. When the Messiah comes, that's all he needs to do is build a temple. Imagine if that wouldn't happen, the Messiah would have to come and start from the beginning. It would take decades to get to where we are today, and we don't want him to have to wait. So we have a tradition that God is going to build the physical before the spiritual, the redemption occurs. God is going to allow the physical infrastructure to be built so that when the Messiah comes, everything is basically ready for him.
Okay, so Rabbi Weisberg, therefore a third temple still has to be built and will be built, right?
Correct.
And is this happening? Is this in the works? What do you think about that?
No, not at all. The current government of Israel has absolutely no intentions whatsoever to proceed, not only with building a temple, but even allowing the Jews to build, maybe a small synagogue on the Temple Mount. There's no plans in the works. It also should be pointed out that according to biblical law, the Temple Mount is an extremely holy place. Mm-hmm. And therefore, before a person goes onto the Temple Mount, they have to be completely pure. And according to biblical law, in order to be completely pure from any type of ritual impurity, there has to be a special procedure of purification with a red heifer, with a red cow. The whole procedure is detailed in the Bible, that the ashes of this cow create a special kind of mixture in which it's a whole purification process. So basically, until the Messiah comes and reestablishes that system, the religious Jews don't go to the Temple Mount is actually very big. There's an area in the middle of the Temple Mount where the temple actually stood, and that area is forbidden for Jews to go to unless they're ritually pure. But the Temple Mount is much bigger. There are areas on the Temple Mount where you are allowed to go to. But what I'm saying is that the government of Israel they're not a religious government, although they respect religion, they're traditional, but they have no intention whatsoever. There are no plans in the works whatsoever in anybody's mind in the Israeli government to proceed with any plans of building the temple before the Messiah actually comes.
Oh, wait a minute. You believe that the Messiah, but the Messiah can only come after the temple is built, or
No,
can
no, no. The Messiah is the one who builds the temple
the Messiah builds the temple?
under his instruction. I mean, he doesn't physically do it. But
Uh-huh.
but he is the one that orders. First of all, there's a lot of details about the temple that we don't know. We need a prophet to teach us, because the exact details, the blueprint of the third temple is in Ezekiel chapter 40. But if you read through that chapter, you'll see it's very unclear. It's not a clear picture. There are many ways of interpreting the verses. We don't have a detailed plan. We can't even go ahead to build a temple. Also, the temple, the Temple Mount I mentioned to you is very, very large.
Right.
Everything in the temple is very, very precise. Like the altar has to be built has in a very, very specific place. You have to know to the inch where the place of the altar is. It's the exact spot where Abraham was told to sacrifice his son Isaac. You know the story. He was not sacrificed. God was just testing him. But that place where he was about to sacrifice Isaac, that place was consecrated, and you need to have that exact spot. That's the place where they built the altar during the first temple and the second temple. And you need a prophet to point out exactly where it is. It's impossible to figure out without
Right.
prophecy.
Rabbi Weisberg, just a second. So the Messiah from heaven has people build it and then returns, or you're
Well, we don't believe the Messiah is in heaven. The Messiah is a human being, a Jewish leader. We don't
oh,
know we have no clue who he is until he reveals his identity. He has actually no clue who he is until God tells him, hello, I'd like to inform you that I've appointed you as the Messiah. So
oh,
the Messiah is living amongst us now. We have no idea who he is, and he doesn't know who he is, but he's a human being. He's a great person, but he's just a human being. We don't
I
believe
see.
we don't
Okay.
attribute any sort of divinity to the Messiah. He's just a great Jewish leader.
I see. Okay. And yes, and sorry, I was speaking in a Christian sense there. It's not a return. He's coming and he's here already as a human being, or he will be here during that time.
Well,
And
since we're very close to the according to all the predictions and all the calculations, we're very, very close to the actual redemption. So he has to be already an adult. So he was already born, and he's already an adult, and he's already in a position that when God calls upon him to do what he has to do, it's just like Moses. When you read in the Bible, Moses had no idea that he was chosen. He ran away from Egypt because the Pharaoh wanted to kill him, and he was away from Egypt for 80 years. And then suddenly he's pasturing in the desert. He's walking with the sheep of his father-in-law Jethro, and then God appears to him in the burning bush, and he says, "Hey Moses, I chose you to redeem the Jewish people." And Moses says, "Me? Are you kidding? Who am I to redeem the Jewish people? I'm just a simple shepherd." And God is arguing with him for 7 days in the Bible, trying to convince him, "No, you're the right person." And so Moses had no clue, and Moses didn't even want the job. And we believe the same thing about the Messiah. He's a righteous, very, very righteous person who does not consider himself the Messiah. He probably, when God tells him that you are, he'll say, "What, me? Who am I? I'm just a plain person."
he's not divine.
Not in any way. It's a regular human
Okay.
being, born to human parents.
Okay, so Rabbi Weisberg, now in your studies and in your videos, you discuss, as you just said, you think that you believe this is very close, that the Jewish people are close to the end of the exile. There's going to be a redemption, and you see the next 6-7 years as something really happening during this time. And for you, the year 2027 is monumental. Can you tell us about that a bit?
Yes. So the reason why I got to the year 2027, first of all, I want to stress that all my calculations are done with Hebrew years. Hebrew years are not calculated from January till December. They're calculated from the Hebrew New Year, which is we call Rosh Hashanah. And that occurs sometime, it's a lunar year, so it doesn't occur on the same date on the secular calendar every year. It occurs usually in September, sometimes in early October. And that's the beginning of our new year. So that's when the Jewish year starts. I use English years when I speak on the videos because it's much easier. People don't relate to the Jewish year. Now we're the Jewish year 5,781, but people don't relate to that. So I use the parallel of the English year, but they're not exactly the same because the year of 2021, which would parallel the Jewish year of 5,781, they're not exactly the same, because our year already started in September, and the secular year is only going to start January 1st. But I'm using those years just to make things simpler. But how do I get to 2027? Is because at the end of Daniel is told that the redemption is going to come after 1,335 years, from a time when something very, very offensive, that's the translation of the Hebrew word, something very offensive, was placed on the Temple Mount. Now, nobody really knew what that was. In the history of the Jewish people, we know that after the Romans destroyed the temple, in order to pour salt on the wounds of the Jews and to make them feel even more rejected and that they should completely lose hope of ever rebelling against the Roman Empire, so they built a temple to the Roman god Zeus, or whoever he was, and that was an abomination in Judaism, obviously, to build on the Holy Temple Mount a pagan temple. So that occurred after the Second Temple was destroyed in the year 70. And then it was assumed that the 1335 would be counting from the year 70, but we passed a long time ago, 1335 years from the year 70. That was in the 14th century, so we're way past that. So nobody really understood what it means that 1335 years from this abomination. So it's very, very simple what I did. After I said it, people asked me, how come no one else thought of it? It's so simple. But the abomination was not this pagan temple built by the Romans, but actually a structure that was built by the Muslims. It was built, it's the Dome of the Rock, and it's still there till today. And it was completed in the year, there's a plaque that's there on the Dome of the Rock, and it was completed in the year 692. So the reason why we call that a very inappropriate structure, even though it's not really a pagan temple, there are no pagan gods there. And actually the Muslims don't even pray there, by the way. There's another structure on the Temple Mount that is called the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that's where they pray. But the Dome of the Rock is not really, it's not built as a mosque, and it's not built to pray, and there are no idols there. But we call it very offensive to the Jewish people because the Islamic belief was that Muhammad, even though he respects the Jewish prophets, and he also respects, by the way, the Christian prophet, Jesus, is respected by Muslims, but they say that Muhammad was greater than everybody, than all the Jewish prophets, and even greater than Moses, and he replaced the law. He replaced the law with new laws, with the laws of Islam. So in other words, Saturday was changed to Friday. Instead of fasting Yom Kippur, they fast the whole month of Ramadan. Instead of praying 3 times a day, they pray 5 times a day. Instead of the laws of kosher, they keep some of the laws of kosher, but a lot of the laws they don't keep. So he changed all the laws, and we consider that very offensive because basically, and he also taught that God is really upset with people who don't accept Muhammad, so much so that it's a divine command, and God takes pleasure in killing people that don't accept Islam. So we find Islam a very, very offensive religion. Why? Because they took our God and made him basically into a very, very mean and wishy-washy God by saying that first you choose the Jewish people. You promise in the Bible several times that you'll never reject the Jewish people. No matter how bad they are, they'll be punished, but they'll never be rejected. It's promised over and over in the Bible that at the end, the God will always reconcile with the Jewish people. And then and God gives us all these laws. And then you say, God woke up one day and said, you know what, let me rethink this. I think I'll change Saturday to Friday. I'll change this. I'll change that. I'll give up on the Jewish people. I'll choose the Muslims. You're making God into some kind of fool. And you're also making him into some kind of cruel being that says that it's okay to kill people who don't accept. I mean, I don't want to be offensive to Christians because Christians today are incredible people. But there was a time when Christians also had these very offensive beliefs, and they believed that, that God changed his mind, that he rejected the Jews, and now the Jews are forever damned and they're suffering because they rejected Jesus. And if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to be damned in hell. Christians today, I don't think believe that. I think most Christians, especially in America, believe that anybody who lives a good moral life, a God-fearing life, whether you believe in the exact narrative of the New Testament or the Old Testament, God is not going to punish somebody just because they have a mistaken belief. The main thing God cares about is people leading moral lives, good lives, committed lives, being honest, being faithful to their family, et cetera, et cetera. That's the God that we believe in, the God of mercy, the God of compassion, not the God that's very sticky on details and says, if you don't do this, or you don't do that, or you don't believe this, or you don't believe that, I'm going to, punish you, even if you're a good person, even if you're a moral person, even if you're a kind person, but because you don't have the right set of beliefs. So to us, the Muslim belief, the Muslim system is a cruel system, and it's degrading our God. So that's why we consider the Dome of the Rock, which actually has verses from the Quran inscribed on the inside and on the outside, stressing over and over again that Muhammad is the true prophet and Islam is the true religion, and not Judaism or Christianity, but Islam. So that's an offensive structure. It was built in 692, 1335 years from 692 is exactly is going to get us to 2027.
Okay. So Rabbi Weisberg, perhaps this is for another show, but definitely in Christianity, the belief in Jesus Christ, as we know, is crucial in many respects for salvation. But we'll save that theological dialogue for another time. Now, Rabbi Weisberg, so you see 2027 as instrumental, very significant year, and this involves the coming of the Messiah, and at that time God will have vengeance on the enemies of the Jewish people, correct?
Well, again, Judaism is not a religion that promotes any type of vengeance. We really have no interest and no desire to see our enemies being punished or vengeance being taken. Even though the Bible talks in those terms, we tend to accept it more as a metaphor that the vengeance is just the realization, just like we mentioned before about the Jewish concept of hell, that the realization that a person made such mistakes and caused such pain to himself or to his family or to society by sinning and by being dishonest or by being unfaithful, etc. So the vengeance against the enemies of God is the clarity and the realization of how wrong they were and how much damage they caused and how much they were against God and God's plan. It's not the actual death and suffering of our enemies that we're looking for. We're not interested in that. We like to see the transformation. The vengeance that the Bible talks about is basically that the truth will be revealed, and and those that fought against the truth will be very pained that they were on the wrong side of history.
And Rabbi Weisberg, overall, in terms of the coming of the Messiah in the Jewish perspective, in terms of the year 2027, everything that's happening today, overall, you consider this time coming very close, coming very soon, right?
Correct. But I just want to point out, it's not just that. There are dozens of other indications that we're really at the very end. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the prophecy that before the Messiah comes, the land of Israel will be restored to the Jews, and the infrastructure to allow the Messiah to continue on the next stage of redemption, of actually the spiritual redemption, of bringing God's presence back to Jerusalem and the temple. So that is predicted to happen before the Messiah comes, and that has happened. And now the state of Israel is fully ready. The infrastructure is built. It's a very successful state. It's a very economically strong state. All the whole infrastructure, the schools and the synagogues, everything is there, and everything is ready. So that's one prophecy. There are many other prophecies that are predicted to happen before the Messiah comes, and they already happened. For example, like I told you, the war against Jerusalem right before the Messiah comes. We see the whole world almost, except for Donald Trump and his supporters, and he has enormous support among the Christians. Is that is trying to make it very clear that the Jews have a biblical right to the land of Israel and a biblical right to Jerusalem. So the war against Jerusalem is really a ferocious war that we're really witnessing, and it's pretty incredible actually that Obama just put out a book. He just published his third book, his autobiography, and again he made it very, very clear what his position is, and he actually is a very powerful figure in the Democratic Party, even though he's actually not going to be sitting in the Oval Office. We know his influence is enormous. And he really has a lot to do with setting the tone. And he writes in this book, again, making it very clear that in his opinion, the Jews have no biblical right to the land of Israel, but the Palestinians have more of a right. And all the terrorism that the Jews experienced from Islamic terror, where thousands of Jews were brutally murdered, men, women, and children from Islamic terrorists, he says it's all the Jews' fault because they had no right of coming to the land of Israel. He doesn't believe that they have a biblical right. He erases the entire history of the Jewish people that were in the land of Israel. For before they were exiled, the Jewish people had a presence in the land of Israel for well over 1,000 years, that we've been praying for our return to Jerusalem. He ignores all that, and he says basically it's the Jews' fault. They had no reason coming back, and they have no rights, and they have no rights to Jerusalem. He just reiterates all that in a book that just came out last week, making it very clear that he's preparing, in his mind, there's going to be a new administration, and this is the tone that he's setting, that Jerusalem and Israel is not really, Jews have no, he doesn't even believe in the Bible or God. I don't think he believes in God either. So we see this war. I mean, this is predicted right before the Messiah comes. There's going to be enormous alliance of nations that are trying to stop the Jews from taking possession, because in the spiritual sense, these forces don't want the Messiah. And if the Messiah needs the temple, and the Temple Mount has to be in Jewish hands for the Messiah to build it, they want to take the Temple Mount and the old city of Jerusalem away from the Jews, so that the Messiah won't have access to it.
Wow, Rabbi Weisberg, fascinating stuff. I wish we had another hour, but it's an honor, privilege to have you on the show and just to discuss all of these fascinating, profound things. Thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Thank you for having me.
Rabbi Weisberg, where can many members of our audience that are inspired and intrigued with everything you're saying, where can they follow you?
Well, they just go to YouTube and search Rabbi Isser Weisberg, and they'll find me.
And which is what I did, and watched all your fascinating videos.
Thank you.
Rabbi Weisberg, thank you for joining the Glazov Gang.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.